Can a teenager, immersed in video games and website coding, become a saint? The story of Carlo Acutis proves to us that holiness knows no age limits, no limitations of time. In the heart of the 21st century, when the digital world seemed to pull young people away from God, an Italian boy emerged. He masterfully used technology as a tool for evangelization, demonstrating that you can live a vibrant Catholic faith without sacrificing the experience of being a young person of your time. Chapter 1. The Early Years of Grace. On May 3rd, 1991, in London, England, Andrew and Antoinette Acutis welcomed their son, Carlo, into the world. Andrew and Antoinette were an Italian couple, temporarily living in the British capital for work. From the moment he arrived, this child possessed an extraordinary soul, one that would soon reveal itself in amazing ways. His parents, successful intellectuals but distant from religious practice, could never have imagined that God had placed a future saint right in their hands. When Carlo was just a few months old, the family moved back to Italy, settling in Milan. There, the little boy would grow up surrounded by the cosmopolitan and modern atmosphere of one of northern Italy's most important cities. Carlo's early years seemed like any other Milanese child's. Playtime, childhood pranks, and those first steps in learning. However, from a very young age, signs of something special began to appear deep within his soul. At the tender age of 3, Carlo displayed an inexplicable attraction to churches. During family strolls through Milan, the little boy would stop every single time they passed a church, begging his parents to take him inside. This childish insistence on visiting churches puzzled Andrew and Antoinette, who couldn't understand where this religious inclination came from. It wasn't something they had consciously instilled, as they themselves weren't particularly religious. Carlo's behavior inside the churches was equally striking. Once inside, the boy would go directly to the main altar, showing a natural reverence for the tabernacle that surprised everyone who watched him. He seemed to sense, with that mysterious wisdom that children sometimes possess, the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. His parents would watch him remain in silence, with a concentration and focus uncommon for his age, as if he were talking to someone invisible but very real to him. The influence of Beatrice, the Polish nanny who cared for Carlo, proved providential during these early years. This simple and deeply devout woman was the instrument God used to awaken and nurture the little boy's faith. Through her stories about the life of Jesus, the tales of the saints, and the prayers she taught him, Beatrice planted the first seeds of what would become an extraordinary spirituality. The boy listened attentively to these sacred narrations, asking questions that revealed a surprising understanding of the mysteries of faith. Even in these initial years, Carlo displayed a cheerful and balanced personality, naturally combining his spiritual inclination with the interests of a child his age. He liked to play, to laugh, and to explore the world around him, but always with that transcendent dimension that would characterize his entire life. His parents began to realize that they had a special child in their lives, someone who seemed to live with one foot on earth and the other in heaven. Chapter 2. The Awakening of Faith. Carlo's formal education began at the Marcellina Sisters' School in Milan, where his spiritual personality found a fertile ground to develop. The nuns who knew him during these years would later recall the impression it made on them, seeing such a young boy with such a mature and authentic faith. This wasn't just superficial childish religiosity, but a genuine personal relationship with God that manifested itself in everything he did. At the age of 7, Carlo made a decision that would profoundly mark the rest of his life. He asked to receive his first communion. This request surprised his parents, as the boy hadn't yet reached the usual age for this sacrament. However, the spiritual maturity he demonstrated and his evident understanding of the Eucharistic mystery convinced the priests that he was ready. On the day of his first communion, Carlo experienced such intense joy that from then on he couldn't live without daily Eucharist. The transformation that the Acutis family experienced as a result of Carlo's deep faith is one of the most beautiful aspects of this story. His mother, Antoinette, who had lived far from religious practice for years, began to feel a spiritual unrest that she couldn't explain. Seeing the authenticity of her son's faith, she began to question her own life and to seek answers to questions she had never asked herself before. "Carlo was my salvation," Antoinette would confess years later, acknowledging that it was through her son that she rediscovered the path to God. This spiritual awakening of the mother wasn't an automatic or superficial process. Antoinette had to study, to educate herself, and to delve deeper into Catholic doctrine to be able to answer the numerous questions that Carlo posed to her about the faith. The boy had an insatiable curiosity to know more about God, the saints, and the mysteries of the Catholic religion. His questions were so profound and precise that they forced Antoinette to take theology classes to keep up with her son's spiritual inquiries. Carlo's father, Andrew, although more discreetly, was also touched by the grace that radiated from his son. While his approach to faith was more gradual and reserved, he couldn't remain indifferent to the authenticity and joy that characterized Carlo's spiritual life. The presence of this saintly child transformed the family environment, turning it into a true Christian home, where prayer and the practice of virtues became a natural part of everyday life. During these formative years, Carlo also developed his love for Holy Scripture and for the history of the Church. He was especially fascinated by the lives of young saints, such as Saint Aloysius Gonzaga, Saint Dominic Savio, and Saint Tarcisius, finding in them role models to follow and companions on the path to holiness. This identification with young saints wasn't accidental. Carlo sensed from a young age that his own vocation was to achieve holiness in a few short years, living each moment of his existence intensely. The school environment also benefited from Carlo's presence. His classmates found in him a loyal and generous friend, always willing to help and to defend the weakest among them. The teachers watched with admiration as this young boy managed to maintain exceptional academic performance without ever neglecting his spiritual life, demonstrating that holiness isn't at odds with human excellence in all areas of life. Just as Carlo Acutis found in the Eucharist his highway to heaven through profound sacramental devotion, the great mystics of our faith discovered secret pathways to experiencing God's miraculous power in their lives. Saint Teresa of Avila, Doctor of the Church, documented 7 spiritual keys that transformed her relationship with the divine practices that opened the floodgates of heaven's graces and led to extraordinary miracles in her life and those around her. If Carlo's passionate love for Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament has touched your heart, discover how Saint Teresa's 7 secret keys can deepen your prayer life and unlock the miraculous in your own spiritual journey. The 7 secret keys of Saint Teresa to achieve miracles is available in the first pinned comment or scan the QR code on screen, but only for a limited time. Chapter 3. Eucharistic Passion. The absolute center of Carlo Acutis' spiritual life was undoubtedly the most holy Eucharist. From the moment of his first communion, the young boy developed such an intense devotion toward this sacrament that he came to define it as my highway to heaven. This phrase, which would become his most well-known motto, perfectly summarizes the profound understanding he had of the Eucharistic mystery and its fundamental role on the path to sanctity. Every morning, before heading to school, Carlo attended Holy Mass at one of the churches near his home in Milan. This daily practice wasn't a family imposition, nor an empty routine, but the result of an authentic spiritual need. The young boy affirmed that he couldn't start the day without encountering Jesus in the Eucharist, because it was there that he found the strength and the joy necessary to live each day as a true Christian. If we approach the Eucharist every day, we go straight to paradise, he used to say, with the simplicity that characterized his way of expressing the deepest truths of the faith. Carlo's Eucharistic devotion wasn't limited to participation in daily Mass. The young boy often spent long periods in adoration before the Blessed Sacrament, especially after school or during the weekends. Those who observed him during these moments of prayer were impressed by his composure and the intensity of his communion with Christ, present in the consecrated host. It wasn't uncommon to see him cry with emotion during adoration, moved by love and gratitude toward Jesus, who made himself present in such a real and near way. This profound understanding of the Eucharistic mystery led Carlo to study with passion the Eucharistic miracles that had occurred throughout the history of the Church. From the age of 11, he began to investigate these extraordinary phenomena with the rigor of a true scholar. It wasn't a matter of superficial curiosity or an interest in the supernatural understood as spectacle, but a sincere search for evidence that confirmed the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, and that could help others to understand and love this central mystery of the Catholic faith. Carlo's investigation into Eucharistic miracles was exhaustive and meticulous, using the information technologies available in his time. Although much more limited than today's, the young boy managed to document more than 180 cases of Eucharistic miracles, recognized by ecclesiastical authority. Each of these cases was carefully studied, verified, and catalogued, including photographs, testimonies, and official church documentation. This research work required numerous phone calls, exchange of electronic correspondence, and in some cases, family trips to visit the places where these prodigies had occurred. The most visible fruit of this research was the creation of an international exhibition on Eucharistic miracles that Carlo designed and organized completely. This exhibition, composed of informative panels with photographs, historical explanations, and official documentation, aimed to make accessible to people of all ages and levels of education the knowledge of these extraordinary events. The exhibition began to tour parishes, schools, and Catholic centers, first in Italy and later in other countries, becoming a powerful instrument of evangelization and of strengthening Eucharistic faith. The way in which Carlo explained the Eucharistic miracles revealed his deep theological understanding of the sacrament. He understood that these prodigies added nothing to the reality of Christ's presence in the Eucharist, because that presence is always real and total, regardless of any extraordinary manifestation. The Eucharistic miracles were, according to his understanding, gestures of divine mercy, destined to strengthen the faith of those who doubted or who had lost reverence toward this sacrament. God manifests himself in an extraordinary way to call our attention to what happens in an ordinary way in every Mass, he explained, with the wisdom of someone much older than his years. Before continuing with St. Carlo Acutis' Marian devotion, we ask you for a special favor. If this story has nourished your faith and inspired you to live your Christian vocation with greater authenticity, we invite you to pray a Hail Mary for our work and mission of evangelization. And if you wish to support us, you can do so through the Super Thanks button here on YouTube. Your prayer and generosity allow us to continue sharing these stories of sanctity that our world so desperately needs. May St. Carlo Acutis intercede for you, and may the Most Holy Virgin Mary bless you. Let us now continue discovering the profound Marian love that characterized the spiritual life of our saint. Chapter 4. Devotee of the Most Holy Virgin Mary. Carlo Acutis' devotion to the Most Holy Virgin Mary constituted the second fundamental pillar of his spiritual life, perfectly complementing his Eucharistic love. From a very early age, the young boy manifested toward the Mother of God such an intense filial love that he came to define her as the only woman in my life. This expression, far from being a cliché, reflected the profound understanding he had of Mary's role in the life of every Christian, and especially on his own path to holiness. The daily recitation of the Holy Rosary became an unwavering practice for Carlo. Every day, without exception, he dedicated time to meditate on the mysteries of Christ's life. Through this Marian prayer, which he considered fundamental to keep his relationship with Jesus alive. During the recitation of the Rosary, Carlo meditated deeply on each mystery, finding in them not only spiritual teachings, but also a model of life that he wished to imitate. The consistency in this practice revealed his spiritual discipline and his understanding that holiness requires perseverance in the small, everyday things. Carlo's Marian devotion was notably enriched through the study of the apparitions of the Virgin Mary, recognized by the Catholic Church, with the same passion and rigor that he applied to the study of Eucharistic miracles. The young boy dedicated himself to investigating the main Marian apparitions in history, from the oldest to the most recent. His particular interest focused on the apparitions of Fatima, Lourdes, and Guadalupe, finding in each of them specific messages that he applied to his own spiritual life and that he wished to share with other young people of his generation. The apparitions of Fatima held a special place in Carlo's heart. The story of the three shepherd children, Francis, Jacinta, and Lucy, fascinated him because they were children of similar ages to his own who had been chosen by the Virgin Mary to transmit important messages to humanity. Carlo studied the messages of Fatima in detail, especially those related to the importance of prayer, sacrifice, and reparation for sinners. In the last years of his life, he even had mystical experiences related to the shepherd children of Fatima, feeling a special spiritual closeness with these young saints. His love for the Virgin of Guadalupe was also extraordinary. Carlo saw in this apparition a particular manifestation of Mary's maternal love toward all people, especially toward the most humble and needy. The image of Guadalupe deeply impressed him, and he often contemplated with admiration how the Virgin had chosen to appear pregnant, carrying Jesus in her womb, establishing a direct connection with the Eucharistic mystery that he loved so much. The Virgin of Guadalupe is, in a way, a Eucharistic sign because she is pregnant and carries Jesus in her womb, he explained. With that ability of his to find profound connections between the different aspects of the Christian mystery, when he was 8 years old, Carlo experienced an extraordinary mystical moment during a Marian procession in a church in Milan. According to his mother's testimony, the boy had a vision in which the Virgin of Fatima stopped before him and placed her heart in his chest. During this vision, Mary asked Carlo to consecrate himself to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and to her Immaculate Heart. This experience profoundly marked the young boy's spirituality, who from then on periodically renewed his consecration to the Sacred Hearts, consciously living as a son of Mary and a brother of Jesus. His study of Marian apparitions led Carlo to create another of his exhibitions, entitled The Callings of the Virgin, Marian Apparitions and Shrines in the World. This exhibition, although less well known than the one on Eucharistic miracles, equally reflected his desire to share the treasures of the Catholic faith with his contemporaries. Through informational panels, photographs, and historical documentation, Carlo presented the main Marian apparitions recognized by the Church, explaining their theological significance and their relevance to the spiritual life of the faithful. The exhibition became another effective instrument of spreading the gospel, helping many people to discover or rediscover the role of Mary in their lives. Chapter 5. Digital Apostolate. In an era when the internet was beginning to transform the way people communicate and access information, Carlo Acutis brilliantly sensed the evangelizing possibilities of new technologies. At just 11 years old, he already mastered computer programming autodidactically, becoming a true pioneer of digital apostolate. His prophetic vision about the potential of the internet for spreading the gospel earned him the nickname God's Influencer, a title that perfectly reflected his ability to use modern media in the service of the Catholic faith. Carlo's most ambitious and well-known project was the creation of the website www.miracleeucharistici.org, a digital platform that exhaustively documented the Eucharistic miracles recognized by the Catholic Church throughout history. This project, which required more than 2 years of intensive research, represented a genuine revolution in the way the spiritual heritage of the Church was presented and disseminated. Through this website, Carlo made information that was previously scattered in diocesan archives, convent libraries, and specialized documents accessible to anyone with an internet connection anywhere in the world. The methodology that Carlo employed to create his website revealed a maturity and academic rigor that was surprising for his age. Each Eucharistic miracle included on the platform had been carefully verified and had the corresponding official documentation. The young boy was not satisfied with second-hand information, but always sought primary sources, pontifical documents, diocesan records, eyewitness testimonies, and scientific analyses when available. This meticulousness guaranteed the credibility and scientific seriousness of his work, fundamental aspects for a project that aimed to strengthen people's faith through knowledge of extraordinary events. The visual presentation of the website was also carefully designed by Carlo. Each Eucharistic miracle featured high-quality photographs, location maps, detailed timelines, and theological explanations accessible to people of different levels of education. The design was attractive and modern, but always respectful of the sacred character of the content. Carlo understood that the way information is presented is as important as the information itself, especially when addressing young people accustomed to visually striking digital content. The success of the website about Eucharistic miracles was immediate and lasting. Thousands of people from all over the world began to visit it regularly, finding in it not only valuable information, but also an impetus to deepen their Eucharistic faith. Many testimonies reached Carlo's family, recounting conversions, strengthening in faith, and renewed Eucharistic devotions inspired by the content of the website. These spiritual fruits confirmed the young boy's intuition about the evangelizing potential of the internet when used with noble and transcendent purposes. In addition to the main website about Eucharistic miracles, Carlo developed other digital projects related to the Catholic faith. He created multimedia presentations about Marian apparitions, developed educational materials about the lives of the saints, and designed catechetical resources for children and young people. His ability to adapt to different audiences and formats revealed an intuitive understanding of the communicative possibilities of digital media. Each project maintained the same standards of quality, rigor, and respect that characterized his main work. Carlo's vision of digital apostolate went far beyond the simple creation of religious content for the internet. He understood that new technologies could be powerful instruments for modern evangelization, allowing the Christian message to reach places and people that traditional methods couldn't touch. With just a few keystrokes, "I can reach Australia," he'd say with enthusiasm, comparing the possibilities of his time to the long journeys the apostles had to undertake to preach the gospel. This prophetic understanding of the missionary possibilities of the internet made Carlo a forerunner of what we now know as digital evangelization. He saw the future and embraced it. Chapter 6. Charity in Action. Carlo Acutis' authentic holiness wasn't just in his intense prayer life or his apostolic projects, but also in his concrete commitment to those most in need. From a very young age, young Carlo demonstrated a special sensitivity towards the suffering of others, and an extraordinary generosity that led him to share everything he had, without reservation, with those who needed it most. This charitable dimension of his personality revealed that his love for God naturally translated into love for his neighbor, especially towards the poor and abandoned. One of the most touching aspects of Carlo's charity was his relationship with the homeless people he encountered on the streets of Milan. By the age of 9, he had already developed the habit of carrying money from his allowance and homemade sandwiches to give to those sleeping on the streets. On several occasions, he took off the shoes he was wearing to give them to people who needed them more than he did. This attitude of total detachment surprised even his parents, who saw how their son practiced heroic charity with the naturalness of someone who had truly understood the gospel. It was simply who he was. In the school environment, Carlo stood out as a protector of the weakest and a defender of those who suffered any type of discrimination or bullying. His naturally charismatic personality and his recognized leadership among his peers allowed him to intervene effectively in situations of injustice or abuse. During weekends and school vacations, he actively participated as a volunteer in soup kitchens and assistance centers for people in need. Carlo's exercise of charity was always accompanied by deep discretion, without seeking recognition or admiration for his works of mercy. Sadness is looking at yourself. Happiness is looking at God, Carlo used to say, expressing his conviction that true joy is found in forgetting oneself and in generous surrender to others. This wasn't about him. It was about them and about God. Chapter 7. A life of ordinary holiness. One of the most attractive characteristics of Carlo Acutis' holiness was his ability to live an intense spiritual life, without renouncing the interests and activities of a young man of his time. Far from presenting himself as a mystic abstracted from the world, or as an excessively serious teenager, Carlo demonstrated that it is possible to achieve holiness while maintaining a cheerful, balanced, and deeply human personality. This dimension of his life is especially significant for young people today, who find in him a model of holiness that is accessible and realistic. Video games had a place in Carlo's life, but always within reasonable limits that he himself had imposed. Aware of the risk of addiction that these entertainments could represent, the young man had decided to limit his playing time to 1 hour per week. His passion for technology went far beyond simple entertainment, seeing it as a powerful tool that could be put at the service of noble purposes, especially evangelization. He also liked soccer, music, he played the saxophone, and he had several domestic animals that he took care of personally, often creating funny videos starring his pets using special effects inspired by Star Wars. He was a kid, a holy kid, but still a kid. At school, Carlo was recognized as an applied and brilliant student, capable of obtaining excellent grades without apparent effort. His natural intelligence, combined with a well-organized study discipline, allowed him to fulfill all his academic obligations without interfering with his spiritual or apostolic activities. The relationship with his parents was extraordinarily mature and affectionate, and he often consoled them in difficult moments, offering them spiritual perspectives that helped them to face everyday problems. This inversion of roles, in which the son became the spiritual teacher of the parents, occurred so naturally that it generated a climate of mutual respect and admiration. He was wise beyond his years. Chapter 8. The Encounter with the Cross. In October 2006, when Carlo had recently turned 15, his life took an unexpected turn that would lead him directly towards the definitive encounter with his Lord. The first symptoms of what would later be diagnosed as fulminant leukemia appeared suddenly, radically altering the routine of this young man who until then had enjoyed perfect health. However, the way in which Carlo faced the disease and the last days of his earthly life constitutes one of the most beautiful testimonies of faith, hope, and abandonment in divine providence. His reaction was truly extraordinary. The initial symptoms were apparently minor: unusual fatigue, lack of appetite, and a pallor that caught the attention of his parents. Carlo, who had always been a vital and energetic young man, began to show signs of weakness that contrasted sharply with his usual character. However, instead of complaining or worrying excessively, the young man welcomed these first discomforts with a serenity that surprised those around him. It was as if he intuitively understood that something important was about to happen in his life, something that was part of the divine plan for him. He trusted in God's plan. When the doctors confirmed the diagnosis of acute leukemia, the news fell like a lightning bolt on the Acutis family. The parents faced the terrible reality that their son, so young and full of projects, suffered from a very serious disease that threatened his life. However, Carlo's reaction to this news was extraordinary. Far from sinking into despair or bitterness, the young man received the diagnosis with a supernatural peace that astonished doctors and family members. "I offer all my sufferings to the Lord, for the Pope and for the Church," were the first words he spoke upon learning the severity of his condition. He was thinking of others, even then. During the few days that his hospitalization lasted, Carlo transformed his room into a true cenacle of prayer and evangelization. He made his suffering a prayer. Despite the physical pain and increasing weakness, young Carlo maintained an extraordinary sense of humor and a constant concern for the spiritual well-being of those who visited him. The doctors and nurses who cared for him were deeply impressed by his positive attitude and the way he managed to console other patients suffering from similar illnesses. Instead of needing consolation himself, Carlo became a comforter to everyone who came near him. The Eucharist remained the center of his life, even during his illness. Every day, despite his physical difficulties, Carlo received Holy Communion with a devotion that deeply moved those who witnessed it. It was clear that, for him, these moments of sacramental encounter with Jesus were the source of the supernatural strength that allowed him to face suffering with such serenity. "I am happy to die, because I have lived my life without wasting a single minute on things that do not please God," he confessed to his mother during one of these intimate moments of communion. His final conversations revealed the depth of his spiritual life and the maturity of his understanding of the meaning of Christian suffering. Carlo spoke of death, not as a terrible end, but as the moment of definitive encounter with the one he had loved throughout his life. "I am happy to die, because I have lived my life always looking towards Jesus," he declared with a clarity and peace that seemed supernatural in a 15-year-old facing the imminence of death. On October 12, 2006, exactly 4 years after the date on which the Feast of Our Lady of the Pillar is celebrated, and on the same day that the Church commemorates the shepherd children of Fatima, Carlo Acutis gave his soul to God. His death was serene, surrounded by the love of his parents, and with the certainty of someone who had lived every day of his short existence as a preparation for this final encounter. The last words he spoke were a prayer of thanksgiving to God for having allowed him to live a life full of love and service, despite its brevity. Chapter 9. The Fruits of Holiness. The death of Carlo Acutis, far from representing the end of his spiritual influence, marked the beginning of an irradiation of grace that would spread throughout the world, touching hearts and transforming lives in extraordinary ways. From the first days after his passing, clear signs began to appear that this young man had attained heavenly glory and that his intercession before God was powerful and effective. Testimonies of conversions, healings, and spiritual favors attributed to his intercession multiplied in a surprising way, confirming the intuition of many that they had known a true saint. The first miracle officially recognized by the Catholic Church took place in Brazil, in the chapel of Our Lady of Aparecida in Campo Grande, in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul, on October 12, 2010, exactly 4 years after Carlo's death. A 7-year-old boy named Matthew, who suffered from an annular pancreas, a congenital disease that prevented him from retaining any food or liquid, was taken by his grandfather to venerate a relic of the young Italian. The moment the boy touched the relic, which consisted of a piece of a t-shirt that had belonged to Carlo, he experienced an instantaneous and complete healing that astonished the doctors who had been treating him. The healing of Matthew was exhaustively investigated by medical specialists and theologians, appointed by the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. For months, a multidisciplinary team studied every aspect of the case: the boy's medical history, the evolution of his illness, the characteristics of the alleged healing, and the absence of scientific explanation for the sudden and complete recovery. The medical opinions were unanimous in recognizing that the healing lacked scientific explanation and that it constituted a phenomenon that transcended known natural laws. The second miracle officially recognized occurred in Costa Rica and involved a young university student named Valerie Winters. In February 2022, while studying in Florence, Italy, Valerie suffered a serious bicycle accident that caused a severe head trauma with cerebral hemorrhage. The doctors who treated her expressed serious doubts about her chances of survival, and in the event that she did survive, they predicted permanent neurological after effects. Valerie's mother, desperate at her daughter's critical condition, undertook a pilgrimage to Assisi to pray at the tomb of Carlo Acutis. During her visit to the sanctuary where Carlo's remains rest, Valerie's mother experienced a profound inner certainty that her daughter would be healed through the intercession of the young blessed. This conviction led her to intensify her prayers and to completely entrust the case to Carlo's intercession. A few days later, against all medical odds, Valerie began to show signs of improvement, which specialists described as inexplicable from a scientific point of view. The recovery was so complete and rapid that the young woman was able to resume her university studies without any neurological sequelae. In addition to these two officially recognized miracles, thousands of testimonies have been documented of spiritual favors, conversions, and extraordinary graces attributed to the intercession of Carlo. Young people from all over the world have found in him a model of authentic Christian life and have experienced profound transformations in their spiritual lives after learning about his story. Many parents have testified how their children, after visiting the exhibition on Eucharistic miracles created by Carlo or reading about his life, have developed a more intense devotion to the Eucharist and have positively modified their habits and priorities. Catholic educational centers have reported numerous cases of students who, inspired by Carlo's example, have decided to participate more actively in sacramental life and in apostolic activities. Many young people have testified that knowing the story of this millennial saint has helped them understand that holiness is not reserved for past eras, but that it is an attainable goal for anyone who decides to live their Catholic faith coherently. This evangelizing influence confirms Carlo's intuition about the potential of the internet and modern media for spreading the gospel. The conversions of adults attributed to Carlo's intercession have also been numerous and well documented. People who had drifted away from their faith for years have testified that learning about this young man's story sparked a spiritual awakening within them, leading them to rediscover the transcendent meaning of life. Many parents who weren't practicing their faith returned to church after their younger children showed an interest in Carlo, mirroring the phenomenon that occurred in the Acutis family when he was still alive. Chapter 10. Beatification, Acknowledgement by the Church. The beatification process of Carlo Acutis unfolded with exceptional speed. Especially compared to the Catholic Church's usual timeline, this reflects both the clear evidence of his sanctity and the pastoral urgency to offer the young people of the 21st century a model of an authentic and appealing Christian life. Cardinal Angelo Scola, the Archbishop of Milan, officially initiated the cause for beatification on May 13, 2013, just 7 years after the young man's passing. The diocesan investigation gathered unanimous testimonies, highlighting the authenticity of Carlo's faith, his heroic charity, and his extraordinary ability to positively influence those around him. On July 5, 2018, Pope Francis promulgated the decree declaring Carlo Acutis venerable, officially recognizing that he had lived the Christian virtues to a heroic degree. The examination of the first miracle, the healing of the Brazilian boy, Matthew, was particularly rigorous, being exhaustively studied by teams of medical specialists and theologians appointed by the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. On February 21, 2020, Pope Francis officially approved the decree, recognizing as authentic the miracle attributed to the intercession of the Venerable Carlo Acutis. The beatification ceremony, held on October 10, 2020, at the Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi, was an extraordinary event, drawing thousands of young people from around the globe. The overwhelming presence of teenagers and young adults at the celebration confirmed Carlo's ability to connect with new generations. Cardinal Agostino Vallini, a special envoy of Pope Francis, presided over the ceremony, where Carlo was officially declared blessed, becoming the first digital native to achieve this ecclesiastical recognition. During the homily, his ability to use new technologies as instruments of evangelization was particularly emphasized, presenting him as a role model for young people of the 21st century. Chapter 11. Canonization, First Millennial Saint. The recognition of the second miracle attributed to the intercession of Blessed Carlo Acutis marked the final step toward his canonization, culminating a process that had captured the attention of the Catholic world, and particularly the new generations. On May 23, 2024, Pope Francis authorized the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints to promulgate the decree, recognizing as authentic the miraculous healing of Valerie Valverde, the young Costa Rican woman who had suffered a severe head trauma in Florence. This second miracle, required by canon law for canonization, definitively paved the way for Carlo to be declared a saint. The official announcement of the canonization occurred during the Ordinary Consistory on July 1, 2024, when Pope Francis included Carlo Acutis among the 15 candidates who would be elevated to the altars. The news was received with extraordinary enthusiasm by young Catholics worldwide, who saw in this papal recognition the confirmation that sanctity can be achieved in any era and under any circumstance. The date initially scheduled for the canonization was April 27, 2025, during the Jubilee for teenagers. But unforeseen circumstances forced a postponement of the ceremony. The passing of Pope Francis on April 21, 2025, caused a temporary pause in the canonization process. But the new pontiff, Leo XIII, the first American pope in history, quickly confirmed his intention to proceed with the scheduled canonizations. In his first ordinary public consistory, held on June 13, 2025, Pope Leo XIV surprisingly announced that Carlo Acutis would be canonized on September 7th, 2025, along with Pier Giorgio Frassati, another young blessed who had been included in the same process of elevation to the altars. The preparations for the canonization intensified during the months leading up to the ceremony. St. Peter's Square was prepared to receive the tens of thousands of pilgrims who were expected to come from all continents. In particular, special pilgrimages were organized for young people, recognizing that Carlo had become a fundamental point of reference for the new Catholic generations. Vatican authorities estimated that more than 100,000 young people between the ages of 15 and 30 would participate in the celebration, making the canonization one of the most important youth events in recent church history. On September 7th, 2025, under a clear sky that seemed to bless the ceremony, St. Peter's Square was filled with young people from all continents. The cultural diversity and contagious joy of the participants created a unique atmosphere that recalled the best traditions of World Youth Days. Many of those present wore T-shirts with Carlo's image or with his most well-known phrases, especially "The Eucharist is my highway to heaven," which had become the unofficial motto of the celebration. The canonization ceremony, presided over personally by Pope Leo XIV in his first canonization as pontiff, was broadcast live on television and the internet to the entire world, reaching an estimated audience of over 500 million people. During the homily, the Pope particularly highlighted the relevance of St. Carlo Acutis' message for the digital generations, presenting him as a model of how to use new technologies for the glory of God and service to one's neighbor. Carlo teaches us that the internet can be a network of communion when it is used to unite people around Christ, the pontiff declared. The culminating moment of the ceremony arrived when Pope Leo XIV pronounced the solemn formula of canonization. For the honor of the Most Holy Trinity, for the exaltation of the Catholic faith, and the growth of Christian life, with the authority of our Lord Jesus Christ, of the holy apostles Peter and Paul, and ours, after having reflected at length, repeatedly invoked divine aid, and heard the opinion of numerous brothers in the episcopate, we declare and define St. Carlo Acutis, and inscribe him in the catalogue of saints, establishing that throughout the Church he be devoutly venerated among the saints. These words were met with a deafening ovation that lasted for several minutes. The canonization of St. Carlo Acutis represented multiple historical milestones for the Catholic Church. Not only did he become the first saint born in the 1990s, but also the first digital native saint, and the first saint officially recognized as a patron of the internet and digital communications. His image, dressed in jeans and sneakers, broke with the traditional iconography of saints, offering young people a model of holiness that they consider relatable and attainable. The ceremony concluded with the veneration of the relics of the new saint, and with the announcement that his liturgical feast would be celebrated every October 12th, the date of his death and entry into eternal glory. Chapter 12. Prayer to St. Carlo Acutis. Prayer to St. Carlo Acutis, patron saint of the internet and Catholic youth. O glorious St. Carlo Acutis, young saint of the third millennium, who knew how to find in the Eucharist your highway to heaven, intercede for us before the throne of the Most High. You who lived with joy the Christian vocation in the 21st century, teach us to be saints in our time, using the gifts that God has given us for his greater glory and the good of our brothers and sisters. Saint Carlo, model of purity and charity, who loved Jesus present in the Eucharist with all the ardor of your youthful heart, help us to discover the beauty of this sacrament of love and to live each day in intimate union with our Savior. You who honored the Blessed Virgin Mary as the only woman in your life, Teach us to love our Heavenly Mother with the same filial tenderness that characterized your Marian devotion, so that she may always lead us to Jesus. Saint Carlo, pioneer of digital evangelization, who knew how to use the internet as an instrument of the apostolate, intercede for all young people who navigate the virtual world so that they may find on the net opportunities for spiritual growth and service to their neighbor. Through your powerful intercession, O Saint of heroic charity, grant us the grace to serve with generosity those most in need, especially the poor and abandoned, seeing in each of them the blessed face of Christ. Saint Carlo Acutis, who offered your sufferings for the Pope and for the Church, help us to accept with love the crosses that the Lord allows in our lives, uniting them to the redemptive passion of Jesus for the salvation of the world. You who departed for the house of the Father at just 15 years of age, but with a life full of virtues, intercede especially for all sick young people, so that they may find in their pain a path of sanctification and an opportunity for Christian witness. Oh, St. Carlo, protector of Catholic youth, watch over all Christian families, so that in every home the love of Christ may reign and holy vocations may flourish, that continue your evangelizing work. Through the merits of your holy life and through your powerful intercession, grant us, O Saint Carlo Acutis, the grace that we humbly ask of you in this prayer. Here the particular petition can be mentioned, if it is for the greater glory of God and the good of our souls. Help us to live as true disciples of Christ in today's world, so that one day we may join you in eternal blessedness, where the Eucharist will be transformed into the beatific vision of the one and triune God. Amen.